Hi, welcome to the Traders Help Desk Market Overview for the week of July 12th. Now we have some very interesting patterns on the chart, and as you can see, I'm looking at a 45-minute chart on all of my markets. And the reason that I say that we have some interesting patterns is you can see we're almost at the ATR on crude, actually testing an area on the NASDAQ, at an ATR on the Swiss franc, close to the ATR on the euro, at a congestion dot on the Canadian, at the ATR on the British pound, and at the ATR on the 45-minute Aussie dollar. These are really significant areas, and it's where my trades are generated. So I wanted to show you really quickly why the higher time frames can have an impact on a lower time frame. So to show that, I'm going to bring over the market analyzer and we're going to look at the Aussie. Okay, you see that we are at an ATR on the 45-minute Aussie chart. The issue with this is that we're expecting a bounce down because we've had a little bit of divergence there. It did make a low, but there were not enough sellers to even register on the volume. When you go to the 180, and if you notice here on the market analyzer, you see that you're close to an ATR. That tells me to look at that chart because I could be going into a bad trade setup. In other words, I'm trying to go short here, but on the 180-minute chart, you can see that we're at an ATR. You can also see that there is volume divergence. As it approached this ATR, we had volume divergence. So if I go short on the 45-minute chart, I have support directly beneath me at 73.91. So if I mark that on this chart, just to give you an idea of what you would be doing, as it stands right now, you could go from 74.15 down to 73.91, and it has already rejected that once. So there's only maybe a 20 pip difference between where the ATR is on the 45-minute chart and where you have this support line over here on the 180-minute chart. What I would prefer is for this to flip the ATR on the Aussie, then it will come back and test the ATR. I want to see sellers diverging, then I would take an entry. This is why I actually refer to a higher time frame to make sure I am not taking a long or a short position into support or resistance. Here's another example on the Canadian. Okay, you can see on Friday you're in a congestion zone on this 180-minute chart. When you look over at the 45-minute, you can see that you're at the ATR. Almost identical setup to what we saw on the Aussie right now. This is the ATR from the 180-minute chart. What happens? Price pops down exactly to the ATR over here on the 180-minute chart, and then what happens? It goes up. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when we're looking at these congestion zones and these ATRs. They act as extremely strong support and resistance areas. So if we go and we now look, you can see that this has come down. It has touched the ATR, and it is now going back to this congestion dot on the 180-minute chart. You can see that we're at a congestion area also on the 45-minute chart. what would I anticipate? I would anticipate that it will come back and that it will test this ATR before it moves up. We have to look at the volume at this area to make sure that there is divergence so we can take that trade. This is one of the reasons that I use the market analyzer or the scanner with the price to the ATR column and price to congestion. It lets me know ahead of time, hey, on the higher time frame, you are at an area of support and resistance. You do not want to trade against that higher time frame. So again, if we go and we look at some of the others right now, for example, the ES, if I go over and look at the ES, and this is telling me, hey, you need to look at this chart. You can see you've got a congestion dot and you have an area of resistance on a higher time frame, which is the 720-minute chart. You also have a resistance area at 2077. So I would anticipate at least coming back to 43.98 before, and possibly we may even come down to 2049. So this is what I'm looking for on the ES. You go to the Dow. You can see on the Dow chart, 45-minute, you already have, and you can visually see, you have a lot of resistance above you. Now, we have managed to break the 720. There's a double area there. We have managed to break it. We may reach up to 750 and then come back and test to make sure that we have formed an area of support before that continues up. So now that you understand that, let's go through the markets and why I'm using these lines. You can see over on gold 45-minute, we have managed to flip the ATR from red to blue. Now, I would anticipate it coming back and testing to make sure that the support is holding. So far it has. It held over here and it held over here. So I am expecting it to test the ATR before it continues up. The only exception to that is the fact that we still have the Greek debt crisis going on. They thought they were going to approve it. Now they're coming back. They're wanting more changes. So we may see gaps today, just like we have for the past 2 Sundays. I would be watching for that. Over on crude, you can see that it is approaching the ATR at 53.04. This is a key area. You need to read the volume. If we have an increase in buyers, it will more than likely come up to about 54. It will come back and test for support, and then we may see new highs in crude. It just depends on the volume at those key areas. On the Dow, it has reached an area of resistance on the 180. I would anticipate testing the ATR and then analyzing the volume as it comes back to those areas. On the NASDAQ, you can see that we have broken through the resistance area on the 1440. It has come back and it has tried to test it. I would like to see one more test so that I could compare the lows and the volume on the lows to determine whether it will continue up. Pretty much the same thing on the ES. You do have a lot of overhead resistance, so I think they're going to have to come back and at least test for sellers, and then buyers are going to have to come in really strong to get through these areas. Over on the British pound, we've come back to the ATR at 55.22. I am expecting it to come down to 54.39. Again, with the Greek crisis, we actually may see gaps on all of the markets again this Sunday. On the Canadian, you see that we have come up to the congestion dot on the 45-minute. You also have a green resistance area, which is from the 180. I would anticipate it coming back and testing the ATR. I would need to read the volume at that area before deciding whether to take a position or not. On the euro, we are coming back to the ATR. This is a prime area to read the volume. Now, we may gap up today, but if we do gap up, I would expect, number one, the gap would be closed, and I would expect a test of 13 before it continues up as it stands right now. Same thing on the Swiss franc. We saw a lot of action on the Swiss franc, but it typically was all in one bar last week. We had a lot of wide bars on the Swiss franc. You can see here, 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 here. I mean, just otherwise it's just gappy. You just get these wide bars. Now, we are coming back to test the ATR here at 0685. This is where you need to read the volume. The green lines are already telling you you have a lot of overhead resistance. I would expect this to come down and take out 0629. You do need to analyze the volume in order to ensure that it does that and that it does not gap when the market opens today.